Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something fundamental, really. How do we make smart choices when, well, the future's uncertain?
Yeah, it's a constant challenge, isn't it?
Totally. We're going to unpack some really powerful ideas, mainly from Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets. She was a pro poker player, which gives us a fascinating angle.
It really does. Her whole framework stems from that high-stakes environment.
And it hit me reading it every single decision we make, from tiny things like breakfast to huge life stuff. It's basically a bet on an outcome we can't fully predict.
That's the core idea, yeah. Recognizing that helps detach our ego, maybe. From whether things work out perfectly, it shifts focus to the process of deciding.
Right, the process. And one of the first big things that jumps out is this idea you have to separate a good decision from a good outcome.
Mm-hmm. Which sounds simple, but it's actually quite counterintuitive for most of us.
Yeah, because we're totally wired to judge ourselves and others
Yeah.
based on what happened after the decision, right?
Exactly. We equate success with being smart, failure with being dumb. But life, like poker, has this huge element of luck, of chance.
So a really well thought out decision, using all the info you had, it could still blow up in your face.
Absolutely, due to stuff you just couldn't foresee. And conversely, sometimes you make a, let's be honest, pretty questionable choice, and it works out great just by pure luck.
Oh, yeah, been there.
We all have. But the key insight is, if you only judge by the outcome, you never really learn what makes a decision good or bad in itself. You miss the role luck played.
Which brings us to this term she uses, resulting. Basically, judging a decision only by the result.
Yes, resulting. It's a massive trap, a huge obstacle to actually getting better at making choices.
Because you don't analyze why things happened.
Precisely. Was it skill? Was it luck? Was it a bit of both? If you don't dig into that, you're just guessing. You might repeat bad plays that got lucky or ditch good strategies that just hit a patch of bad luck.
Okay, the perfect example she uses, and it's so vivid, is Pete Carroll in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks. 1 yard line.
Oh yeah, pass play instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch. Beast mode.
Right, and boom, interception, game over. The criticism was just immediate and brutal.
Off the charts. Worst call ever,
Yeah.
basically. But then, people like Benjamin Morris at 538, Brian Burke at Slate, they actually crunched the numbers.
And what did they find?
Well, they argued that statistically, it wasn't nearly as insane as it looked in that moment. They looked at clock management, but also the actual probability of an interception there.
Which was?
Surprisingly low. For similar passes from the 1 yard line, that whole season, 0 interceptions. Historically, maybe 2%.
Wow. So based on the data Carroll had, a touchdown or even just an incomplete pass stopping the clock.
Yeah,
Way more likely outcomes.
far more likely. Now imagine if that pass had been caught for the touchdown.
Oh, he'd be a genius. A
Yeah.
legend. Same decision, totally different outcome.
Yeah.
Totally different narrative.
Exactly. That just shows you the power of resulting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much the outcome shapes our perception of the decision itself.
It really does. It's a powerful bias. She also tells that story about the CEO who fired his president because the company wasn't doing well compared to competitors.
Right, and then things didn't immediately get better after the firing.
So the CEO instantly thought, oh man, it blew it. Bad decision.
But when Duke dug into it with him, his actual reasoning for the firing, his analysis of the market, the talent pool, all that, it was actually pretty solid based on what he knew then.
So another case of a potentially good process leading to a bad, or at least not immediately good, outcome.
Exactly. Bad result doesn't automatically equal bad decision.
Okay, so how do we even start to notice this resulting tendency in our own thinking? It seems kind of sneaky.
Well, she has this interesting exercise. Think about your best decision ever and your worst.
Okay.
What's revealing is how rarely people identify a bad decision that got lucky as their best, or a good decision that ran into bad luck as their worst.
Huh. We tend to just align them. If the outcome was good, the decision must have been good.
Pretty much. We rewrite history in our heads to make it make sense, to make the outcome feel like it was the logical product of the decision, even though intellectually we know luck is a thing.
Like maybe taking a risky shortcut,
Mm.
driving that paid off.
Yeah.
You don't think, wow, I got lucky. You think, see, smart shortcut.
Exactly. You reinforce the bad decision because of the lucky outcome.
And this links straight into hindsight bias, right? That, oh, I should have known feeling after something happens.
Precisely. Hindsight bias is the fuel for resulting. Once we know the outcome, it feels inevitable. Of course that was going to happen.
And then we judge the past decision based on that false sense of certainty.
Yeah, we forget the genuine uncertainty that existed at the time. The classic, maybe grim example is someone driving drunk but getting home safe.
Right. The
Huh.
outcome was good, no crash. But the decision was objectively terrible.
Terrible. And that lucky outcome shouldn't make anyone think it's okay to do it again. But hindsight, combined with resulting, can warp that logic. So for us, when looking back, we need to actively fight that I should have known feeling. Try to recall what info was really available then.
It's like our brain craves a neat story, cause and effect, predictability, even when reality is just messy.
Totally. Which connects to how our minds actually process things. Duke brings in Gary Marcus's work on the two systems of thinking.
The reflexive and deliberative minds.
That's them. The reflexive is your fast, automatic gut feeling system. Unconscious mostly. Think intuition, shortcuts.
And deliberative is.
Slow, conscious, analytical, weighing pros and cons. Requires effort, like doing a math problem versus recognizing a face.
Okay, so understanding those two helps us see where errors might creep in.
Exactly. That reflexive mind, while essential for survival, quickly judging threats, relies on those mental shortcuts, heuristics, and they can be wrong.
Like maybe instantly dismissing an idea from a coworker you don't like without really thinking about the idea itself.
Perfect example. Your reflexive mind delivers a quick negative judgment based on the source, not the substance. And we don't always kick our deliberative mind into gear to question that first reaction.
So the goal isn't to get rid of the reflexive mind, but to, what, make it smarter. Align it better with our thoughtful intentions.
That's a great way to put it, aligning them better. And this is where she argues poker is such a fantastic laboratory for this stuff.
Right, because it forces quick decisions under pressure with incomplete information.
And real money on the line, real consequences. You can't just sit there analyzing forever.
There's that call the clock rule, right, where opponents can force you to decide.
Yep. Puts you under the gun, literally sometimes. It mimics that pressure we often feel in life, making it a great place to observe how these two mental systems interact when uncertainty is high.
It's wild that poker was actually the model for John von Neumann when he developed game theory.
Isn't it? He saw that poker, unlike chess, captured the essence of real-world decisions. Hidden information, bluffing, psychology, trying to figure out what the other guy is thinking.
He called chess just computation, right? Like there's always a theoretically right move.
Yeah, a well-defined form of computation. But poker and life involves deception, incomplete information, considering others' perspectives, much messier.
And that difference really highlights how luck and skill play out differently.
Hugely. In chess, a bad move usually leads pretty directly to a worse position. The link between decision quality and outcome is tighter.
But in poker,
A terrible player can absolutely win a big pot against a world champion on a lucky river card. You'd almost never see that kind of upset in chess based on a single move.
like Duke's example of running a red light, you might get through okay, lucky outcome, still a terrible decision.
Exactly. Or the CEO firing the president. Might have been a well-reasoned decision based on the info at the time, but the company still struggled. Good process, bad outcome.
And the fact you don't see your opponent's cards in poker is just like life, isn't it? We rarely have all the information when we make a choice.
So true. Which makes learning just from the outcome really hard. Did your bluff work because it was brilliant, or because the other guy just happened to have nothing? Without seeing his cards, you can't be sure.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. How we form beliefs in the first place. This part of the book was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, it kind of flips the script on how we think, doesn't it?
We assume we carefully weigh evidence, then form a belief.
Right. But the research, like Daniel Gilbert's work, suggests it's more like, hear something, believe it's true, maybe sometimes later, go back and question or verify it.
Believing is the default setting. It takes effort to doubt.
Seems like it. Our minds are built for efficiency, perhaps. The example she uses is perfect. The idea that baldness comes from your mother's father.
Yeah, everyone knows that one.
Everyone knows it. But how many people have actually, looked up the genetics? Probably very few. It just gets accepted and passed along.
So evolutionarily, maybe it was better to quickly accept things, especially from our senses, like assume the shadow is a predator.
Plausibly, yeah. Better safe than sorry in the ancestral environment. Speed over absolute accuracy sometimes. The problem is we seem to apply that same believe-first mechanism to abstract information we get from others, where maybe more skepticism is warranted.
And once a belief is formed, it acts like a lens, right? Coloring how we see new information.
Totally. That famous "they saw a game" study is classic. Dartmouth and Princeton fans watched the same footage of a rough football game.
And saw completely different games. based on who they were rooting for.
Exactly. Their prior beliefs and allegiances literally changed their perception of reality. And other studies show similar things with, say, watching protest footage, whether you see it as legitimate dissent or a threatening mob, can depend heavily on your pre-existing values.
Which leads straight into the idea of filter bubbles, especially online.
Yeah.
Eli Pariser's term.
Mm-hmm. Social media algorithms are designed to keep us engaged, so they learn what we like, what we agree with.
And feed us some more of the same.
Right. Which can feel comfortable, but it means we end up in these echo chambers, mainly seeing stuff that confirms what we already believe. We don't get exposed as much to different, challenging viewpoints, and this happens across the political spectrum, by the way.
It's kind of unnerving that just being smart doesn't make you immune to this, or to misinformation generally.
Yeah, intelligence isn't a magic shield. Smart people can be very good at rationalizing their existing beliefs, but Duke mentions a simple, fascinating intervention.
Which is,
Just asking someone, want to bet?
really?
Yeah. Apparently, having even a small amount at stake forces a more objective self-assessment. It makes you think, okay, how sure am I really? It introduces a cost to being wrong.
That makes sense. It's like how scientists try to be rigorous about uncertainty. P-values, confidence intervals.
Exactly. It's about quantifying doubt, acknowledging that conclusions are probabilistic, not absolute, inviting scrutiny.
Okay, so moving on. Duke talks a lot about how hard it is to work backward from an outcome to figure out what caused it, separating skill from luck after the fact.
It's incredibly difficult because the outcome is all you see clearly, usually. Her Snackwell's cookie example is great for this.
Ah, yes, the 90s low-fat craze.
Right. People ate tons of these low-fat cookies, thinking they were being healthy, but many still gained weight. Working backward, then, based on the prevailing fat is evil belief, was confusing.
Because they didn't fully appreciate the impact of all the sugar in those cookies yet.
Exactly. They were working backward from the outcome, weight gain, with incomplete nutritional understanding. Hindsight is clearer now, but it wasn't then.
And this uncertainty actually slows down learning, right? Like those rat experiments?
Yeah, the ones with reward schedules. If a rat gets a reward every time it presses a lever, fixed schedule, it learns fast, but it also stops fast if the rewards cease.
But if the reward is intermittent, unpredictable.
Like a slot machine variable schedule, the rat learns, maybe a bit slower, but it keeps pressing that lever for a long time even after the rewards stop completely. Uncertainty makes the behavior stickier.
Because it's harder to tell if the game is over or if you're just on an unlucky streak.
Precisely. And the point is, real-world outcomes are almost always a mix. Rarely 100% skill, rarely 100% luck. Usually somewhere in between, which makes learning tricky.
Which leads us right into self-serving bias, our amazing ability to take credit for the good stuff and blame luck for the bad.
Oh, yeah. We're all brilliant when we win and terribly unlucky when we lose, aren't we? Fritz Heider called us naive scientists, trying to explain things in a way that makes us look good.
That Phil Hellmuth quote is legendary. If it weren't for luck, I'd win every one.
Ha! The ultimate example. But we all do it to some extent, and we also tend to blame other people for their bad outcomes, often overlooking the role luck might have played for them.
Like the Steve Bartman incident in baseball, blaming the fan for the Cubs losing.
Classic case. Easier to blame one guy than accept a complex mix of plays, decisions, and maybe just bad fortune.
So this bias creates a bad learning loop. Good outcome, I'm awesome, reinforced behavior, bad outcome. Bad luck, someone else's fault, don't learn from mistakes.
Exactly. But Duke suggests we can rewire this. We can change the reward in the habit loop. Instead of the reward being feeling good about myself by taking credit blaming luck, it can be feeling good about myself by being a good learner.
So find satisfaction in the process of analysis, in acknowledging mistakes, in understanding the role of chance.
Yes. Seeing mistakes not as ego threats, but as data, as opportunities to improve the process. It takes conscious effort, though. What do you think about actually trying to change that? Seems tough.
It does seem tough, requires humility, which maybe leads to the next idea. We probably can't do it perfectly on our own. We need help.
Exactly. Enter the buddy system or truth-seeking groups. Since spotting our own biases is so hard, getting outside perspectives is crucial.
But not just any perspective, right? Not just people who already agree with us.
Definitely not. Duke makes a fun contrast between David Letterman ambushing Lauren Conrad with an uncomfortable question versus a group that has mutually agreed to help each other see things more accurately.
It's like the red pill scene in The Matrix she mentions. Choosing to see reality, even if it's less comfortable than the illusion.
Right. A good truth-seeking group needs diversity of thought, people willing to disagree constructively, Maybe even designated roles, like two to argue, one to moderate.
She suggests creating a sort of charter for such a group. What are the key things that should be in it?
The big ones are a primary focus on accuracy over agreement or ego, accountability for claims and reasoning, and real openness to exploring different ideas, even unpopular ones. It builds trust.
Then accountability could even mean betting, like putting your money where your mouth is within the group.
Yeah, that can really sharpen the focus. The story about David Gray betting on whether that guy, Ira the Whale, could eat 100 White Castle burgers.
Hilarious. But it makes the point.
It does. When there's something real at stake, even just reputation within the group, people tend to be more careful and honest about their confidence levels. It fights motivated reasoning.
Which also highlights the danger of the opposite. Echo chambers, where accountability is low and confirmation bias runs rampant.
Absolutely. And she points out worrying trends towards ideological homogeneity in some pretty important places, like Supreme Court clerks, or even fields like social psychology.
When everyone thinks alike, who's left to challenge assumptions?
Exactly. It can stifle progress and allow flawed ideas to persist. That's why groups like Heterodox Academy are pushing for more viewpoint diversity in universities.
It's interesting that research shows prediction markets, where people bet on outcomes, can sometimes be more accurate than traditional expert peer review.
Yeah, possibly because the incentive structure forces a more disinterested evaluation of the evidence.
Duke brings up Robert Merton's pseudos norms from science as a good model for truth-seeking groups. Can you quickly unpack those?
Sure, pseudo stands for communism sharing data openly, universalism judging claims based on merit, not the source, disinterestedness seeking truth over personal gain, and organized skepticism encouraging critical questioning and debate.
That sounds like a solid foundation. Universalism, disinterestedness. Those seem particularly hard but important.
They really are. They require actively fighting our natural tribal instincts and biases.
Okay, so within these groups, how you communicate is obviously critical. It's not just what you share, but how.
Totally. Richard Feynman's idea of utter honesty in science is key: share everything relevant, especially the inconvenient bits that might weaken your case.
Avoid cherry-picking data.
Right. And recognize the Rashomon effect. Different people see the same event differently. So actively solicit multiple viewpoints. Think about expert commentators like John Madden on a football play. They break down tiny details to get the full picture. That level of granularity helps.
What are some practical communication tips she offers for better truth-seeking?
Several good ones. Try mentally swapping the source of information. Would you evaluate it differently if someone else said it? That fights bias against the messenger.
Or maybe don't even mention the source initially.
Yeah, focus on the idea itself first. Then there's outcome blindness. When asking for advice on a past decision, don't tell the person how it turned out.
So they aren't biased by the result. Clever.
Very. Also, be aware that your own opinions are contagious. Try to state facts or observations neutrally before giving your interpretation, especially when seeking others' views.
And encourage skepticism, but maybe gently.
Right. Organize skepticism. Frame dissent as questions, express uncertainty like, I'm not totally sure I see it that way, rather than just, you're wrong. And often, try shifting the focus towards the future, what can we do next? Rather than getting bogged down assigning blame for the past.
Okay, let's talk about mental time travel. Using the past and future to improve present decisions.
Yeah, this is about leveraging different temporal perspectives. Thinking about future consequences can curb impulsive present actions, and reflecting on past experiences productively can inform current choices.
But there's a danger of just ruminating, right? Meeting up with your past self in a negative way.
Definitely. The goal is learning, not beating yourself up, and it helps fight temporal discounting.
That's our tendency to value immediate pleasure way more than future well-being.
Exactly. Why it's hard to save for retirement or stick to a diet. Our present self just doesn't care enough about our future self's needs.
So mental time travel helps bridge that gap, like those apps that show you an aged version of yourself.
Precisely. Making the future self feel more real and relatable can motivate better long-term choices. The 10-10-10 technique is also great for this.
Right, ask.
Yeah.
What are the consequences of this decision in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years?
Simple, but it forces you out of just the immediate moment.
Duke also warns against ticker watching, getting obsessed with short-term ups and downs.
Yeah, like watching a stock price constantly. In life, it means focusing too much on daily mood swings or minor setbacks, which can lead to jerky, reactive decisions instead of sticking to a sound long-term strategy.
It connects to path dependence, how the sequence of events affects our feelings more than the overall outcome.
Right, like in the casino example, winning $500 then losing $200 feels worse than losing $200 than winning $500, even though the net result, $300 win, is identical. Our recent experience dominates.
Okay, so if our present self is unreliable, we need ways to constrain it. Enter Ulysses contracts.
Yes, pre-commitment strategies, like Ulysses tying himself to the mast to resist the siren's call. We bind our future selves to follow through on our current, more rational intentions.
Examples.
Setting loss limits before a poker session. Lawyers agreeing on a settlement range before negotiations get heated. Home buyers setting a firm budget before falling in love with a house they can't afford.
Smart. She even suggests a swear jar for certain phrases that signal bad thinking.
Yeah, like finding yourself for saying, I'm sure, or everyone agrees, or for being overly focused on blaming others or not showing self-compassion after a mistake. It's about noticing those red flags in your own language.
Finally, let's touch on scenario planning, backcasting, and premortems, future-oriented tools.
These are powerful for navigating uncertainty. Scenario planning is imagining different possible futures and their likelihoods. Helps you prepare. Like the grant example for after-school all-stars thinking through scenarios revealed needed actions.
And backcasting.
That's imagining a desired future success and working backward to figure out the steps needed to get there. Creates a roadmap.
While premortem is the opposite. Assume failure.
Exactly. Imagine the project or decision has already failed miserably. Then brainstorm all the reasons why it might have failed. It surfaces risks you might otherwise overlook. They're complementary tools. Gabrielle Aidengen's work on mental contrasting also fits here, pairing positive visualization with a clear look at obstacles.
It all seems designed to fight that default retrospective view, that hindsight bias. Which brings us back to the tree of time analogy.
Yeah, it's a great visual. The past is the fixed trunk. The future, before it happens, is all the potential branches. The present is where the trunk meets those branches.
But once an outcome occurs,
The chainsaw of the present cuts off all the other branches that didn't happen, leaving only the one path that did happen, making it look like it was the only possibility all along. That's hindsight bias in action.
like that Conagra grain elevator lawsuit example, where the judge basically had to warn the jury about hindsight bias when evaluating past safety measures.
Because after a terrible accident, it's almost impossible not to think the precautions taken were inadequate, even if they seemed reasonable at the time.
So wrapping this all up, the huge takeaway, the thing to really internalize, is this constant, conscious effort needed to separate the decision quality from the outcome.
Absolutely. And to fight that resulting trap at every turn, focus on the process. What did I know? What were my options? What was my reasoning? Not just, did I win or lose?
Because focusing on process is where the real learning happens.
Right.
That's how you actually improve over time.
That's the only way, really. Otherwise, you're just riding the waves of luck without a rudder.
It definitely makes you reconsider past events. I'm already thinking of times I probably fell right into that resulting trap. I hope our listeners take a moment to reflect too. Think about a recent decision, good or bad outcome, and try to disentangle the process from the result.
Yeah, maybe even try out one of these techniques, the 10-10-10 rule, or consciously looking for disconfirming evidence or talking a decision through with someone who thinks differently.
It really feels like shifting focus from just the destination, the outcome, to the journey. The decision process itself gives you more agency, more control, even when facing uncertainty. You're making better bets on your future.
Couldn't have said it better. You increase your odds significantly when you focus on making high-quality bets, regardless of any single outcome. So after digging into all this, what's one specific thing you might try to apply more consciously going forward?